Okay, testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay, before we start, there's a little change in the schedule for Monday. Let us see. Okay, so we have a sitting with the mindfulness of death from 10 to 10:50. Then from 10:50 to 11:20, then I'll give, I'm sorry, the sitting on mindfulness of death will be from 10:10 to 10:40. Then from 10:40 to 11:20, then I will give the fourth Dharma talk on the fourth factor for stream entry. Then after that, then we have the lunch, and then the afternoon session is the same. And I think yeah, I was just going to mention it. It's good to be a little patient. Yeah. Is there anybody who wanted to do the going for refuge? And I would say to do the going for refuge only if you've been involved with Buddhism for at least a year. If like this is your first exposure, it's not yet time. You want to be sure that you can make that strong commitment. Anybody? Okay, I don't see any hands, so. Okay, so now maybe when we finish the meditation on death, everybody will be going for refuge. You want to do it? Okay, but I think for you, because if there's just one person, we could do it in a sort of more private way. So we don't have to take time out of the schedule for just one person. We could do it sometime after lunch. Okay, so and now we come to the big test. In a way, the four protective meditations converge on the mindfulness of death. And for this we need the screen. Yes. No. Somebody has to write to Zoom to make that share screen function. Okay, maybe I open it first, okay. Then I do share screen. Okay, now it's come. Okay, so I just start off with a statement, because when people hear mindfulness of death, they get scared. It seems like such a pessimistic, grim, frightening practice to undertake. But there's a statement that comes in the Anguttara Nikaya. Let me increase. Here. Okay. That this meditation on death, when developed and cultivated, is of great fruit and benefit. It culminates in the deathless, that is in Nibbana. It has the deathless as its consummation. And this, the Buddha placed a great deal of stress on this meditation and other reflections on death, because this is a fate that we all have to face at some point. And to face it courageously, with equanimity, with tranquility, with acceptance, we have to prepare in advance to condition our mind to face death. I compare this to, suppose you are an aspiring actor and you get assigned a role in a play, let's say Hamlet. So maybe you're assigned to play Hamlet, you're assigned to play Ophelia, and you don't really know when the premiere is. It hasn't been announced, but the team of the cast has been meeting and doing their rehearsals, and they're sending you messages, come to rehearsal. But you just go out to parties with your friends, you go to the coffee shop or to the bar, and you just, look at videos on YouTube and play with Instagram and Twitter. Oh, it's not Twitter anymore now, it's X, right? And then suddenly, finally, just you find yourself in the theater on the premiere day, and the curtain rises and you see the audience is out there and everybody is expecting you to recite your lines, but you're thinking, wait, I didn't know when the premiere was. I didn't see any need to rehearse. Is that the way an actor should responsibly fulfill their responsibility? They have to practice in advance so that they know their lines. So when the curtain opens, then you can recite the lines flawlessly. So if we just live our life just indulging in worldly pleasures, distractions, and then we don't know when death is going to take place, it could be any time, then we're just utterly terrified. It's like the actor in front of the audience. Everybody is looking up with expressions of expectation and awe at the actors on the stage. But I don't know my lines. I didn't practice. Give me a few more months. Give me at least one more month. No, this is the premiere. You're on stage now. Get out there. Okay, so this is the need to practice the recollection of death in advance. Okay, in the suttas, we find like little indications here and there on how to do the recollection of death. But what's interesting is that they're not sort of grouped together into any kind of systematic form. And so many, many years ago, this is when I was living in Sri Lanka, it was in the Forest Hermitage in Kandy in Sri Lanka. And in the library there was a little book that came from Dharamsala called A Tibetan Handbook of Mental Development. It was transcripts of talks given by a Geshe, a learned Lama in Dharamsala, to Western students. And in the early part of the book was the discussion or explanation of the mindfulness of death, and it was arranged very systematically. And so in a 9-point scheme. And so I took that and used that as the basis for my practice. And over the years, maybe I changed some of the elements in his scheme. But I found it very useful. And I think he probably got it from Tsongkhapa's Lamrim Chenmo, and probably Tsongkhapa got it from an Indian tradition which came to Tibet. But it organizes the meditation on death into a very orderly sequence. And so in this particular scheme, we have 3 primary topics, primary themes, and then each primary theme is divided into 3 secondary themes. So altogether we have 9 themes in the meditation on death, and then I added one at the end to make 10 points in the meditation on death. So first we'll take the 3 primary themes. The first is that death is absolutely certain, inevitable, utterly inescapable. The second theme is that the arrival of death is completely uncertain, absolutely uncertain. And then the third primary theme, when death comes, we have to abandon all. Yeah, they're actually corresponding to these themes, are actually expressions in Pali that occur in the Pali Suttas. Yeah, so maranang niyatang, marana agamanang aniyatang, sabang pahaya gamaniyang. And then the fourth theme that I added is the only thing, when we die, the only thing we can bring along is our karma. Okay, so those are the primary themes. And now let's see how they are subdivided. So we take first the primary theme, death is absolutely certain. So how can we validate to ourselves the certainty of death? And so the first way is that we reflect that everyone who has lived before us has died. Every generation, going back through human history and even pre-human history. But just start with human history, the first beings who could be qualified as human beings, that generation has died. And we come to ancient history, all of the emperors and kings, powerful kings and emperors have died. All the millionaires and billionaires have died in past generations. And maybe if there's any younger people here, maybe they still have grandparents alive, but anybody have great-grandparents alive? Anybody have grandparents alive? Wow. Oh, you do? Oh, so you're fortunate in that respect. Okay, but you go to anybody, but nobody has great-grandparents, and then great-great-grandparents, and then generations before that. You just trace the line back, so you could confirm that everyone who has lived in the past, no matter how powerful, how rich, how famous, how learned, how wise, we would consider even the Buddha has passed away, the great disciple Sariputta, Moggallana, Ananda passed away. And so what about me? Am I going to be like the exception to the rule? No. So we know that since everyone who has lived before has died, so when the next generation looks back, they'll see, I have gone. Or maybe if you're young, 2 generations from now, they'll say that such and such a person has died. So we know from this we could confirm, I must die. It's absolutely certain, inevitable, inescapable. The second theme, upattiya sahi vedang maranam agatang sada maranataya okasang vadako via asati, that death comes along with birth. So we say that we're born and maybe we're going to live 75, 80 years, 90 years, but actually when the little baby comes out from the womb, death is already accompanying the baby out into the world. So death is right there. It comes along with birth. And in that verse that I just recited, a little bit scary, Maranataya okasang vadako via asati. It's like an assassin, a murderer with drawn sword, looking for an opportunity to kill me. So death is absolutely certain, and it's just like a shadow right behind me, or maybe like an assassin right behind me, looking for the opportunity to strike. And yet I turn around quickly, trying to catch it, can't see it. Turn to the left, can't see it. But I know it's there because it's just already imprinted in my very flesh from the moment of birth. So death comes along with birth. And then the third way we confirm that death is absolutely certain is that every moment we are moving closer to death. So we think now, okay, suppose I'm like 40 years old. I think, okay, I have another 40 years ahead of me. So I have these 40 years to enjoy myself. But what we don't realize is that every year we're moving closer and closer to death. Is it every year? No. Every month? No, not every month. Every day? No, not every day. Every hour? No. Every minute? Every second? Every second, even split second. It's like when the sun rises in the morning in the east, and we look at the sun, we don't see it moving. You just look at the sun and it seems to be stationary. But then if you look at the sun at 9 o'clock, it's in a different position. If you look at the sun at noon, it's in the middle of the sky. 3 o'clock, it's halfway to the west. 6 o'clock, it's hanging on the western horizon. So you don't see the sun moving, but we know that every moment the sun is moving imperceptibly across the sky. So in the same way, every moment we are moving closer to death. Years ago, I think this was 2006, I was in Taiwan, and I was in a car. We were traveling from one city to another. And in one town, at a stoplight, another vehicle pulled up alongside the car I was in. And the vehicle was a kind of livestock truck. And I heard a squealing sound, and I looked across, and I saw in that truck there were pigs in cages, in a big cage, and they were sort of fighting with each other to get, there must have been like some food to keep them well fed, and they were fighting with each other to get the food and jumping on top of each other. And I realized that that truck was taking them to the slaughterhouse. And yet they were just gleefully, fighting and struggling to get the food and eating to their heart's delight. But as the truck was driving along, it was getting closer and closer to the slaughterhouse. And we're in the same position. Okay, so death is absolutely certain. Then comes the second main theme. The arrival of death is absolutely uncertain. So it's uncertain with regard to time. And you could consider that from several points of view. Probably the main way, like we don't know what age we will be when death comes calling for us. Like sometimes I go to this 1,000 Lotus Terrace and I look at the plates on the boxes. The 1,000 Lotus Terrace, that's where they put the cremated remains of people who have passed away. And the boxes have a little tag on the outside saying date of birth, date of death. And you see some of the tags will indicate the person lived to be even more than 100 years. Others maybe 60 years, 50 years. And then some you see at the age of 12 or 13. Even in a few cases, it would be like somebody was born, let's say, April 14th, 1981, expired April 17th, 1981. Just 3 days, and then they're gone. So we don't know how much of a lifespan we have. Okay, then it's uncertain with regard to the place. We don't know where we will be when death comes for us. We could be at home, or we might be lying sick in a hospital or in a hospice. We might be out shopping and then something happens. Maybe get a heart attack on the shopping line, or get hit by an automobile, or we might be in a car crash, and we go. So there's no certainty of the place. We might be in our home country, or we might be out visiting another country, and then something happens. I go on a tour of India or China or Europe, and then some illness comes or some accident, and thousands of miles away from home, and I'm gone. So it's uncertain with regard to place and uncertain with regard to cause. So many causes of death, including could be heart attack, stroke, cancer, automobile accident, victim of a crazy shooter who just comes into the monastery, have to get rid of all of these Buddhists, boom, 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 and we're gone. Or it can be just in old age, dying of sort of what they call natural causes. The body's vitality goes out. So many different causes of death. Like just the last 3 years, we had this COVID pandemic, and now 1 million people in the United States lost their lives, many of them expecting to have at least a fairly long lifespan ahead of them. And we don't know if some other epidemic is going to break out and just spread through the country, through the world, and then again, millions of people will be gone. So uncertain with regard to cause. Then the third main theme, when death comes, we have to abandon all. We have to give up everything. And then thus we subdivide into 3 categories. First, we have to give up all of our wealth and possessions. That's material wealth, home, car, possessions, and this could include also titles and positions. So one could be the Nayakatero. This is like the chief monk of a network of temples. Have to give up that title. President of this organization, that association, have to give up that title. Chief executive officer of a corporation, chief operating officer, treasurer, and so on. So all of these titles, positions, designations, as well as wealth and possessions, have to be given up. And then maybe what strikes more deeply at the heart, that when we go, we have to leave behind all of our loved ones. So the husband, when it's his time, has to leave behind the wife. Wife, it's her time, she has to leave behind her husband. When the parents go, they leave behind, usually they leave behind their children. Sometimes the children will expire and leave behind their parents, their siblings. We have to leave behind our friends. So all of our loved ones have to go. We have to go leaving behind all of our loved ones, or it could be that our loved ones precede us in death, and then while we live, we have to face the sorrow of losing them. So there must be, the Buddha says, there has to be sabehi mepi yehi manapehi nana bhavo vina bhavo ti. That we have to be parted and separated from everyone we love and from everything we cherish. And then the third thing, we have to abandon not only our loved ones, but even this very body has to be discarded. And the personal identity built up on this body, the basis of this body, this person that I am, that I consider myself to be, that has to be given up. And then the fourth main theme is the only thing that we can bring along when we pass is our karma. According to Buddhism, I don't want to go into the theory of rebirth now, but what happens is that the body breaks up and passes away, but the mind stream, the continuum of mental processes continues on, latching on to a new physical body, a new identity, and what carries along will be our karma, that is our accumulations of the impressions of our good and bad deeds, and our, you could say, the formations of character, the dispositions, interests, inclinations, and so on, that will continue and to shape the new personality that emerges in the next life. So this takes us through the 10-point instructions on the meditation on death. Okay, and now we'll put it into practice, but we could do a little bending and stretching before we get into the practice. Okay, this meditation, it begins in the early sessions with a fair amount of conceptualization and mental discursive thought. But as we go from session to session, we start reducing the amount of discursive thinking, sort of simplifying it until you'll see what happens in the final session, that all the themes just coalesce into one. But we start off to get familiar with it. We go through the different aspects of this meditation. Okay, take your congenial meditation posture. And again, it can be a relaxed and comfortable posture. And begin by settling into the body. Okay, now we're going to be practicing the mindfulness of death, which the Buddha said is of great fruit and great benefit. It culminates in the deathless. It has the deathless as its consummation. So that encourages us and inspires us to engage with this practice. Okay, then we come to the first main theme, that death is absolutely certain, and we always have to make it very personal. Not just death is absolutely certain in the abstract, but my death is absolutely certain. It's absolutely certain that I will die, that I have not escaped death, that I can't escape death. And you have to ponder those ideas and sort of let them sink in. Like dropping a stone into water and the stone sinks to the bottom of the pond. So you let the theme sink into the mind. That my death is absolutely certain. I can't escape death. And then how do I know this? First, I can consider that everyone in past generations, all those who have lived before me, have died. We just reflect that the billions and billions of human beings who have walked on this planet, now their bodies, they've perished and their bodies have just turned to dust. The great emperors of the past, the dynasties of kings, all the great philosophers who have pondered the question of life and death. Not to speak of the ordinary farmers, peasants, laborers, the millions of soldiers who died in battles. Even the Buddha, the great disciples, and all of the great sages in the Buddhist tradition all have gone the way of death. And so certainly I myself must die. The second sub-theme, that death comes along with birth. And so now that I have been born, death is accompanying me all the time. It's right by my side, just waiting for the opening, an opening, just waiting for the opportunity to strike. If you want, you can imagine it as an assassin hidden just behind your back. Okay, then the third sub-theme, every moment We are moving closer to death. Let's not use the we. Every moment I am moving closer to death. Every day, every hour, every minute, every second, every split second. It's like when the sun rises in the east, every split second is moving closer to the sunset in the west. So every moment, my life is moving closer to my death. Okay, so in this way, I know that death is absolutely certain, that my death is absolutely certain, unavoidable, inescapable, because everyone who has preceded me on this planet, every human being, has died, so I must die. Death comes along with birth, so death is always present right by my side or just behind my back. And every moment I'm moving closer and closer to death, to my death. Okay, now we come to the second major theme. The arrival of death is absolutely uncertain, unpredictable, unforeseeable. That is the arrival of my death. First, it's uncertain with regard to time. We're unable to foresee how much time we have left in this life. I don't know when death will arrive and call for me. The arrival of death is uncertain with regard to the place. I don't know where I will be when death comes for me. Whether I will be in my home, lying in my bed, maybe surrounded by relatives and friends, in a hospital or hospice, out on the street, in which country I'll be at the time when death comes for me. My own country or when traveling abroad. And the arrival of death is absolutely uncertain with regard to the cause of death. I don't know in advance what specific factor will cause my death. Whether it will be heart failure, a cancer, some epidemic, the stroke, an accident, automobile accident, victim of gun violence, or just natural death in advanced old age. So we don't know the cause of our death. And so the arrival of death is absolutely uncertain, unpredictable with regard to the time of death. That is our age when death strikes. Unpredictable with regard to the place where death will come for us. And unpredictable with regard to the cause of death. Okay, then when death comes, we have to leave, abandoning all behind, everything behind. So we have to leave behind all of our wealth and possessions, whether it's a lot of wealth or a little wealth, our home, car, our position at work, our title, designations, everything, all external acquisitions and assets have to be relinquished when death comes for us. Then, when death comes for us, we have to abandon and leave behind all of our loved ones. If you're married, you have to leave behind your spouse or your partner. If you have children, you have to leave your children behind. Leave behind all other dear and beloved relatives and friends. If you're a monastic, you have to leave behind your fellow monastics, as well as your students, disciples, supporting lay community. So when we go, we have to leave all our loved ones behind. We go our way and they remain behind in this world. Or death can take our loved ones away from us while we remain behind in this world. And then the third point When death comes for us, we have to discard our body, this physical body that we hold to as the basis for our personal identity. The body that we identify as being mine, I and mine. And then we also have to leave behind the personal identities, the personality that has been built up on the basis of this physical body. So I have to leave behind the identity of being Bhikkhu Bodhi. Somebody else has to leave behind the identity of being John Smith or Vijita Ratnayaka or whatever. So the body is left behind to be cremated, reduced just to ash, or buried and gradually decay. And so when death comes for us, we must abandon all our possessions, leave behind all our dear loved ones, and we must even discard this physical body. And then we come to the fourth major theme, that when death comes for us, then we discard this body, but the stream of consciousness, the mental process, the flow of consciousness, or the stream of consciousness continues on, flows on, and all that goes along with it. The only thing we bring along is our karma, that is the residue impressions or the potencies of our ethically significant actions are good and bad actions, and the various habitual dispositions of the mind are personality traits, interests, inclinations, go along with the stream of consciousness into a new embodiment, a new existence. Okay, now drop all verbalization and conceptualization and just come back to mindfulness of the body in the sitting position. And you can do a few rounds of mindful breathing in and out, in and out. And then you can relax the posture, relax the position, and end the session in the usual way. Okay, we can do now a period of walking meditation. And maybe it's best that you just do the simple walking meditation, mindful. Yeah, I just thought you could also do it that each step I take is bringing me closer and closer. No, but I was going to say, you could just do being mindful of walking right step, left step, right step, left step, attentive to the step in the two phases of moving and contact with the ground. If you want to do it that way, of taking each step is bringing me closer and closer. Oh, yeah, thanks for reminding me. Yeah, we should be back here by 10 o'clock. So it'll be a short walking meditation. Okay, everything working? Okay, so we'll be doing now another period of the meditation on the 10-point recollection of death. And this time I won't do so much for explanation, but leave more space, more time for you to turn the ideas over in your mind. But of course, I will give you the indications, the main points to contemplate. Okay, so take your sitting position. And again, start by setting up mindfulness in the body. And always good to begin this meditation by reminding us of that statement of the Buddha, that the meditation on death, when developed and cultivated, is of great fruit and great benefit. It culminates in the deathless, and it has the deathless as its consummation, the deathless as its goal. So the first point, the main theme, death is absolutely certain. that, that it is my death that's absolutely certain, that I will die. That I cannot escape death. And I know that death is absolutely certain because everyone who has ever lived before me, all the people in past generations have died. And so if everyone in the past has died, there's no possibility for me to escape death. Then the second sub-theme, death comes along with birth. From the moment I was born, death was already present along with me, accompanying me throughout my life, or following me just like an assassin looking for the opportunity to strike. Yeah, so when death arrives, you could look it in the face and think, so there you were. You were following me all the time, and I never saw your face before. Now finally I see you. Okay, the third sub-theme, every moment we are moving closer and closer to death. Every moment my life is moving closer and closer to death. Okay, now we come to the second main theme. The arrival of death is absolutely uncertain, unpredictable, unforeseeable. That is, we have no foreknowledge about the exact time we will die. I don't know how many years I have ahead of me. I don't know what age I will be when I die. I don't know what day I will die. Next, the arrival of death is absolutely uncertain with regard to place, to the place where death will come for me. I don't know where I will die, where I will be when I die. Could be at home, in the hospital. Could be a sudden death out on the street. We don't know where our own death will take place. And then the third sub-theme, the arrival of death is absolutely uncertain, unforeseeable with regard to the cause. We cannot know in advance what the cause of our death will be. Whether illness, accident, tragic disaster, victim of violence, or a quiet, peaceful, natural death in a comfortable environment. So we don't know, each of us, we don't know what the cause of our own personal, individual death will be. Okay, then the third main topic, when death comes, we must abandon everything. When I die, I have to leave everything behind. When death comes, I must leave behind all my wealth, material possessions, and also other personal assets like titles, designations, positions. All of that has to be discarded when we pass on. And when we pass away, then we have to leave behind all our loved ones, all those who are dear and beloved to ourselves. We have to leave them behind and go our own way. Or it's possible that death will take them away, leaving us behind. And then when death comes and claims us, we have to abandon this physical body, this body that I identify with and take to be mine. And also I have to leave the personal identity built up on this body. Or rather, we could say that personal identity is dissolved and no longer exists. And then to fill out this contemplation, you can imagine your physical body being cremated and reduced to ashes and bones. Or if you choose burial, imagine the body being put in its coffin and lowered into the ground to gradually disintegrate. And then the fourth main theme, when we die, when we perish, the only thing that continues on is the stream of consciousness, bringing along the karmic impressions of our good and bad deeds, as well as the personality or personal dispositions, habitual formations, inclinations, and so on. And so then at this point, we have covered the four main themes in the contemplation of death. Now we try to merge them together. We know that death is absolutely certain for each one of us, must die. None of us can escape death. So we use the thought, I must die. I cannot escape death. The arrival of death is absolutely uncertain, unforeseeable. I don't know when death will come for me, what year it will be, what day, what time. I don't know where I will be when death comes for me. And I don't know the cause of my death. I don't know what will be written on my death certificate as the cause of death. And then the third main theme, when death comes, we must abandon everything, leave behind everything. We must give up our wealth and possessions, leave behind all of our dear loved ones, and even abandon this body, this physical body. And so the only thing we can bring along at death is our karma, our good and bad deeds. Okay, now you drop all conceptual formulations and come back simply to mindfulness of the body in the sitting position. Non-verbal mindfulness. Then you can do a couple of mindful breaths in and out, in and out. And then you can mindfully open your eyes and end the session in the usual way. Okay, we'll take a little break now until at 10:40, then I'll give the Dharma talk. So we have about an 8-minute break. We could just relax the mind after that rather heavy meditation. Maybe the younger folks don't take it so seriously. Okay. Okay, so we'll be starting at 10:40, so a couple of minutes before that, be back in your seat. So, okay. Okay, so I'll begin with the salutation to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the fully enlightened one. Okay, so the series of talks has been on the theme of the 4 factors for stream entry. 4 things that the text says, when developed and cultivated, lead to the realization of the fruit of stream entry, and not only stream entry, but to the other 3 fruits, the fruit of once returning, non-returning, and even the final fruit of arhatship. But even if one is not ready for these attainments, they lead to the obtaining of wisdom, the growth of wisdom, the expansion of wisdom. And finally, the text says that these things are helpful for any human being, particularly for anyone who is dedicated to the practice of the Buddha Dharma. And the 4 factors are association with good persons, hearing the good Dharma or the true Dharma, yoniso manasikara, careful attention or wise reflection, and then the last is practice in accordance with the Dhamma. And so far we've covered the first 3, and now we come to practice in accordance with the Dhamma. Dhammanu Dhamma Patipatti. Okay, first I took the commentarial definition of Dhammanu Dhamma Patipatti. One doesn't find very elaborate explanations of this expression in the commentaries, maybe because it's very comprehensive. But the commentary says it is the preparatory or preliminary practice that is in accord with the world transcending Dhamma. So the world transcending Dhamma, that is Lokuttara Dhamma, so that will be technically there are 9 states that make up the world transcending Dhamma. The 4 liberating paths from stream entry to the path of arhatship. There are 4 corresponding fruits. When you reach that path attainment, it's followed by the fruition in which you experience the bliss of liberation made possible by the path. So those are 4 paths, 4 fruits, and then the 9th is really the condition for the paths and fruits, and that is Nibbana, which is, maybe we could say that the paths are world transcending Dhammas and that they lead to transcendence, and Nibbana is the world transcendent Dhamma, that which transcends the conditioned world. And so the Dhammanu Dhamma Patipatti in the broadest sense comprises the preliminary or preparatory practice, that practice which will lead to attaining the world transcending paths. So in the broader sense, this practice in accordance with the Dhamma will include the stages of sila, or virtuous conduct, samadhi, concentration, collection of the mind, and panya, or wisdom. But here, since I don't want to go into the sila aspect, but we're just going to focus a bit on the 2 main factors in Buddhist meditation, which are in Pali, of course, they're known as samatha and vipassana. And in the suttas, we often find these two joined together so that they're virtually inseparable. Sometimes in modern presentations of Buddhism, there's a tendency to draw a sharp distinction between them and treat them almost as different categories. But in the suttas, they're always woven closely together, though there's some difference in aspect between the two, as we will see. But here in the Anguttara Nikaya, at the end of the Book of Twos, the Buddha says that there are two things to be developed, and then we have a chain of terms for the abandoning, fading away, cessation, giving up, and relinquishment of lust, hatred, and delusion. Those are the three root defilements. And then the text mentions many other secondary defilements: anger, hostility, envy, miserliness, conceit, arrogance, and so on. So the task of Buddha's practice is to overcome, to eliminate, to eradicate the defilements of the mind. And the primary instrument for bringing about that attainment, the abandoning, fading away, cessation of all these defilements, is serenity or calm and insight, samatha and vipassana. So what is the relationship between samatha and vipassana? And there's a sutta, well, one sutta, which gives some indication of their relationship. And this is the Buddha's attendant, Ananda, speaking. So he speaks actually about 4 modes of practice, but the 2 primary ones are the first ones. So here we could say the bhikkhu, or let's say the yogi, develops insight preceded by serenity. So this means samatha first, vipassana after. So this is in a way the standard presentation. So you develop some samadhi. Samadhi is sort of the outcome of serenity practice. And then based on that samadhi, you develop insight, and developing insight generates panya, or wisdom. So as the practitioner is developing insight based on this serenity, based on this samadhi or concentration, the path is generated. This is the world transcending path. So this combination of serenity and insight, that is the preliminary or preparatory path. And out of that preparatory path, the irreversible world transcendent path leading directly to liberation arises. And so then once that path arises, the practitioner pursues the path, develops it, and cultivates it. And as he is doing so, then the fetters, these are the bonds that tie us to the cycle of rebirths, those are abandoned, and the underlying tendencies, the deep tendencies to the defilements, those are uprooted. So this particular presentation is pretty much, you could say, the standard template for the practice of the path. But Ananda mentions in alternative mode, he says, here the bhikkhu or the practitioner develops serenity preceded by insight. That means insight first and serenity after, calm after. Then as he is developing serenity preceded by insight, the path is generated, the world transcending path, then the rest is the same. And this brings up a question that I've pondered and has often come up in our class discussions. How could there be insight if there's no serenity, no samadhi? So this is the way I understand it. Actually, there can't be insight, real insight, without serenity, without samadhi. But what this is pointing to, this particular passage, is a mode of practice which we could say today, in today's Buddhist world, has been sort of resuscitated and emphasized by the lineage coming from Mahasi Sayadaw. That's one stream. Another stream is that which comes through U Ba Khin and then to Goenka. And there are other teachers who teach. I think even Ajahn Chah seems to come into this mode of practice, at least much of the time. That what you're not actually developing real insight without a base of samadhi, but what you do in the preliminary phase of practice, you are developing mindfulness directed to the constantly changing phenomena of body and mind. One is noting whatever arises. Usually we start with a certain root object, like in the Mahasi tradition, it's the rising and falling of the abdomen. Some teachers do use mindfulness of breathing as the root object, but then whatever appears, any other bodily phenomena, mental phenomena that becomes conspicuous, you note it and let it go and come back to the primary object. And so whatever arises, you're attending to with mindfulness. And now that is not actually insight in itself, but through that constant application of mindfulness to the constantly changing phenomena, one is building up a kind of concentration which is different from the kind of jhana concentration, since it's not focused on a single unwavering object, but the concentration is directed to constantly changing objects. And so the mind becomes tuned into the ever-changing process of phenomena. It remains inflexibly fixed, unshakably fixed upon the stream of experience. But the object of experience, the object of attention is always changing. And so there's actually first that fixing of the mind, the unification of the mind on the changing process of experience. And so that can be called a kind of samadhi. And then based on that samadhi, the actual insight arises, the actual seeing into the universal marks of phenomena, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness or dukkha, and anatta, nairatmya, non-self or selflessness. And so through the mindful contemplation of changing phenomena, that builds up a strength of concentration that can be called serenity. And then based on that serenity, the actual insight arises. So we still have samadhi preceding insight or panya. But the way you approach the arising of insight is different from this practitioner. This practitioner will develop serenity focused on a single object, aiming to achieve what's called either access concentration or jhana concentration, and then moves to the development of insight. This practitioner moves directly into the practice laid out in the scheme of the Satipatthana Sutta, mindful contemplation of changing phenomena. And on that basis, the mind becomes settled and concentrated, and then through that concentration, insight arises, real insight. Okay, then and then the sutta mentions two other modes of practice. One is a practice that joins serenity and insight. So it seems, anyway, it's a little unclear how that comes about. And then the fourth seems to be the case when insight arises just by somebody who is overwhelmed sort of by reflective thought, and then suddenly the mind settles down, and then the insight arises. But these are the two main modes of practice. Okay, then there's a sutta which shows the kind of skills that are involved in developing both serenity and insight. So here the sutta speaks about one person who gains internal serenity of mind, that is samatha, but not the higher wisdom of insight into phenomena. Whereas another person gains the higher wisdom of insight into phenomena, but not internal serenity of mind. Yeah, I took this passage because it shows what is involved in developing these two complementary practices or modes of practice. Okay, so the person who gains this higher wisdom of insight, but not internal serenity of mind, should approach one who gains internal serenity of mind, one who is accomplished in samadhi practice, and then should ask these questions, and these questions show what's involved in practicing samatha or serenity. So he asks, how should the mind be steadied? How should the mind be composed? How should the mind be unified? How should the mind be concentrated? And the Pali is interesting here. It doesn't quite come through so clearly in the translation. The word translated as steadied is, I think it's santitabang. I don't think I pasted the Pali in, but I just have to rely on my memory. So that word is based on the verb titati, which means to stand. So this is getting the mind to stand still, to stand still on its object. And then the next verb, rendered here as composed, but in Pali it's sannisidhitabang, which is based on the verb nisidati, to sit down. So this seems to be a progression here. It's like you move to a certain place, to a seat, and first you stand still in front of that seat, and then you sit down. So first you get the mind to stand steady upon the object, and then as the concentration develops, or as the attention becomes stronger, then the mind sits down on the object. So it's a more restful state. And then the third factor here is to make the mind unified. I think this is to make it ekagga, one-pointed. So now you're just focused like a laser beam upon the object. And when that happens, then the mind becomes concentrated. The verb is samadhiyati, which is the verbal base of the noun samadhi. So here the mind has entered into absorption upon the object. And then the commentary explains that the mind is to be steadied, composed, unified, and concentrated by way of the first jhana, second jhana, up to the higher jhanas, and then through the base of infinite space, and so on. So Also, some commentaries say that you can have a samadhi that isn't full jhanic samadhi. This is called access concentration, upachara samadhi. Okay, so then when the practitioner gets this instructions, he practices serenity of mind in that way, and then he gains both the higher wisdom of insight and serenity of mind. Okay, then we have the person who gains internal serenity of mind, but not the higher wisdom of insight into phenomena. So this one should approach one who gains the higher wisdom of insight and ask certain questions. And again, seems to be a series of terms here that indicates a progression. So we ask, how should conditioned phenomena be seen? And this text uses the technical word sankhara. And the sankhara are the phenomena that comprise the 5 aggregates. So first we have, how should they be seen? I think the word is dattaba, based on the verb dasati, to see. Then we have, how should conditioned phenomena be explored? This seems to indicate how they should be investigated, how they should be examined. So first you have to know how to regard them, how to look at them, and then how to explore them, to investigate them. And then how should conditioned phenomena be discerned by insight? This, I think, is vipassitabhang. So this indicates the actual arising of insight into the nature of sankharas or conditioned phenomena. And it seems to me, this is my opinion, that maybe we could say getting some instruction on how sankharas should be seen, this would be like getting the mundane or worldly right view, and then how they should be explored and investigated. This seems to point to the practice of yoniso manasikara that we discussed yesterday. So one uses this wise attention, this wise reflection to examine conditioned phenomena. And then when that wise reflection has done its work of investigation and examination, then there arises the actual direct, immediate, personal insight into the nature of conditioned phenomena. Okay, then I took a couple of suttas which show us, it uses the phrase dham anudhamma patipanno, that is, one practicing in accordance with the Dhamma. So I did a search in the electronic Tripitaka to find some suttas which use that phrase, and I brought in a few here. So again, it's speaking about the bhikkhu or monk, but it could apply to anyone. Okay, so when a monk is practicing in accordance with the Dhamma, dhammano dhamma patipanno, this is what accords with the Dhamma. He should dwell contemplating impermanence in the 5 aggregates: material form, feeling, perception, volitions, and consciousness. He should dwell contemplating dukkha, which maybe suffering is not really applicable here. It's not suffering, but it's the unsatisfactory nature of the 5 aggregates, which follows from the fact that they are impermanent. So the texts often say, whatever is impermanent, that is dukkha. Dukkha because it cannot give us full satisfaction, cannot provide a basis for true security, but what is impermanent perishes and vanishes. And if we pin our hopes on those things, then when they collapse and vanish, then suffering follows. So you dwell contemplating impermanence in the five aggregates, you dwell contemplating dukkha, the unsatisfactory nature of the five aggregates, and you dwell contemplating non-self, the absence of a self in the five aggregates. Since the five aggregates are impermanent, they arise and pass away, and so they don't have the essential characteristic of a self in the technical sense in which it's used in Buddhist texts. The self is bound up with the idea of lasting, of enduring, a enduring, concrete, solid center of personal identity. But when we investigate what we identify with as ourself, we always come across one or another, some factor, bodily or mental factor, that can be incorporated into the five aggregates. And those five aggregates are impermanent. They arise and pass away. Because they arise and pass away, they're unsatisfactory. And so we don't want to identify with anything. We can't identify anything that's impermanent and unsatisfactory and take that to be myself. That is myself. And so one who practices in line with the Dhamma is one who dwells contemplating the three characteristics in the five aggregates. Yesterday, when we were explaining Yoniso Manasikara, I didn't want to take the time on this, but there was a passage I had taken out where Sariputta is speaking to another monk, and he speaks about how a good or virtuous monk should carefully attend, that is, apply Yoniso Manasikara to the five aggregates as being impermanent, dukkha or unsatisfactory, and as being non-self. So here we have Yoniso Manasikara. We could say that this is the preliminary or preparatory intellectual work or conceptual work for insight. And once one goes through that intellectual preparatory work, then when one actually sees with insight the five aggregates as being impermanent, dukkha, non-self, then this comes under practice in accordance with the Dhamma. And then there's a sutta which speaks about, it draws a distinction between three types of practitioners: the speaker on the Dhamma, the one who practices in accordance with the Dhamma, and the one who has actually attained nirvana in this very life. So he says, if one teaches the Dhamma for the purpose of disenchantment with material form and so on, the other aggregates, for its fading away and cessation, then one can be called a speaker on the Dharma. If one is practicing for the purpose of disenchantment with the five aggregates by contemplating their impermanence and so on, for its fading away and cessation, then one can be called one practicing in accordance with the Dhamma. And then if through disenchantment with the five aggregates, through their fading away and cessation, one is liberated through non-clinging by eradicating clinging and grasping, then one can be called one who has attained nibbana in this very life. Okay, then we saw that the contemplation of the five aggregates proceeds through the three characteristics: impermanence, dukkha, and non-self. And then there are some other suttas which focus in more finely on what it means to contemplate impermanence. Of course, impermanence is the starting point for insight into the three characteristics. And so this is from the Majjhima Nikaya, actually, Sutta 122. So there are these five aggregates, which are the objects of clinging. And in regard to them, the monk or any disciple should dwell contemplating rise and fall, or arising and passing away. So this is the initial insight into impermanence, seeing their arising and falling away. So one contemplates such is material form, such its arising, such its disappearance, and the same with feeling, perception, the volitional formations, and consciousness, such its arising, such its disappearance. And then the text continues, when one dwells contemplating rising and falling away in these five aggregates, then the conceit I am based on these five aggregates is abandoned. Because you're seeing these five aggregates, that's what I take to be I, mine, myself, but they arise and fall away. So how can I build up any conceit of this is what I am on the basis of these five aggregates? And then the last passage I took shows how a lay follower is practicing for his or her own welfare and for the welfare of others. So here the Buddha is in a dialogue, I think it's with one of the Sakyans named Mahanama. And this is in the Anguttara Nikaya Book of 8, Sutta number 25. So Mahanama, or whoever the Sakyan is, asks the Buddha a number of questions. And now I think this might be the last question: how a lay follower practices for his or her own welfare and the welfare of others. So we have the lay follower is one who is accomplished in faith and then encourages others to acquire and cultivate faith. The lay follower is one accomplished in sila, in ethical behavior, and encourages others in ethical behavior. The lay disciple is accomplished in generosity, in the practice of dana, and encourages others to practice dana. And then we have, he's one who wants to see monastics and also encourages others to go to see monastics. And so here I'm putting the monastics in the position of sappurisa, the good people. And so this we could say is the first of these factors of stream entry, the sappurisa sangseva, associating with good persons. Of course, these have to be good, virtuous, and dedicated monastics. These days, one has to sometimes be a little discerning in who one associates with. Okay, then, so that is like the first factor of stream entry there, or factors for stream entry. Then he is one who wants to listen to the Dhamma, and he also encourages others to go to listen to the Dhamma. So here we have the second factor for stream entry, listening to the Dhamma, Saddhamma Sevana. And then this is just, he's one who retains in mind the teachings he has heard and encourages others to preserve them in mind. In a way, that's just a corollary of listening to the Dhamma. Okay, then the next one He examines the meaning of the teachings that he has learned and encourages others to examine their meaning. So we could say that this corresponds to yoniso manasikara, attending wisely, carefully, thoroughly to the teachings. And then when he understands the meaning of the Dhamma, then he practices in accordance with the Dhamma. So he tries to develop calm and insight, or develops insight into the three marks, and also encourages others to practice in accordance with the Dhamma. So this, we could say, is, in fact, the word used is Dhammanodhamma Patipanno. So this is the fourth factor of stream, the fourth factor for stream entry. So we could see in this advice that the Buddha gives to this lay follower, the four factors for stream entry and for the higher stages are already incorporated. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the talk on the practice in accordance with the Dhamma, and which is the fourth of the four factors for stream entry. And so now, just to take a concluding overview, we see what these four factors are. We've had some explanation of them. So what we should do in our everyday life, try to find good, honest, sincere persons who are dedicated to the Dharma, both those that you look to as teachers and guides, but also as friends that you associate with as companions in your everyday life for study and practice of the Dhamma. So this could be your little local Sangha or community of fellow practitioners that you associate with. Then you find opportunities to listen to the good Dhamma, either by going to Dhamma talks, or now you can tune in to recordings of Dhamma talks over the internet, but also you can study the texts, the primary sources or commentaries on them to learn the good Dhamma. Then you practice on your own, you practice careful attention, wise reflection on the teachings to see how they relate to your life, and not only for purely pragmatic purposes in the narrow sense, but how you can attune your understanding to align with the Dhamma. And then based on this clear comprehension and understanding, then you take up the practice in accordance with the Dhamma, choosing whatever approach matches your inclinations, devoting more time to samatha or more time to vipassana, but trying to bring both into your daily practice. Okay, so maybe this should do for the Dhamma talk, and now we can conclude and we can move for the lunch, and then we will come back at 1:50. We can have some questions based on the morning session on the meditation on death, and then we still have some more sessions, and we're honing and refining the meditation on death. So the most powerful session will be the last one today. So I hope you didn't make plans to leave early thinking, it doesn't matter, I can miss the last session, I know I got it in the morning. If you made those plans, call your person who's coming to pick you up, tell them, please come 3 o'clock or 3:30. Okay, we'll end with 3.